My dear students of 12th Medical, today we are going to discuss one of the important and most interesting topics in the botany, as we have been dealing with the reproduction in the flowering plants, and it is titled as pollen pistil interaction. So stay keen. Pollination, you already know the transfer of the pollen from anther to stigma. This pollination does not guarantee the transfer of the right type of pollen, that is compatible pollen. So the pollen must be compatible for a particular species so that pollination is followed by the post-fertilization events, or post-pollination events rather. Compatible pollen of the same species on the stigma. Pollination does not guarantee this. Now, very often, pollen of wrong type, either from other species or from the same plant when self-incompatible, also land on stigma. You know that the pollinations are of different types, that is self-pollination, homogamy, or cross-pollination. The pistil is able enough to recognize, it's capable enough to recognize the pollen, whether the pollen is of the right type, whether it is compatible, or of the wrong type, that is incompatible. If pollen is of the right type, it is accepted by the pistil and post-pollination events get promoted, which lead to fertilization. When the wrong type of the pollen that land on the stigma, it is rejected by the pistil and prevent the pollen germination and hence the pollen tube growth. This ability, the ability of the pistil to recognize the pollen when its acceptance or a rejection, is the result of continuous dialogue between pollen grain and the pistil. That is, when the particular pollen lands on a stigma, a dialogue starts between this pollen and the pistil. That is through chemical processes, and this dialogue is mediated by the chemical components of the pollen interacting with those of the pistil. This recognition, acceptance, and rejection of the pollen is quite a recent development by the botanists, and this has helped a long way in these breeding techniques, wherein we are capable of producing the high-yielding varieties and improved varieties of plants. After compatible pollination, the pollen grain germinates on the stigma to produce a pollen tube through one of the germ pores. The contents of the pollen move into the pollen tube. Pollen tube grows through the stigma and style and reaches the ovary. Pollen grains in angiosperms are shed mostly at two-cell condition. One of the cells is a vegetative cell and the second one is a generative cell. Vegetative cell, as you know, is larger in size and the generative cell is the smaller one. In most plants, generative cell divides, forms two male gametes during the growth of the pollen tube in the stigma. In some plants, pollen are shed at three-cell stage, as pollen tube carry two male gametes from the beginning. After reaching the ovary, pollen tube enters the ovule through micropyle and then to one of the synergids which guides the pollen tube where it has to deposit this gamete, male gamete. The events from pollen deposition on the stigma until pollen tube enters the ovule are referred to as pollen pistil interaction. Thanks. Have a nice day.